To the guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. And a warm welcome to all of you at the European Economic and Social Committee, the house of the European Civil Society Organization, NGO, Consumer Association, Trade Union, farmers, entrepreneurs, and so on. As a president of the External Relation at the AAAC, let me say that is an honor for us, for me and Luca, and for the committee to host your meeting today on Sudan and the role of civil society in peace building in the Horn of Africa. It is important for two reasons. The first one is linked to the fact that we are living through a moment of a profound global uncertainty, widening geopolitical tension, social fragmentation, polarization, climate-related disaster, rapid technological disruption, and growing mistrust in institutions. In front of these challenges, we need to return to pay the necessary attention to how they ensure the worldwide availability of the global public goods. Those goods that are fundamental for each of us, that are fundamental goods for the coexistence of a nation and often underestimated. Peace, health security, human rights, sustainable environment, and biodiversity. All diplomatic effort must be made to achieve peace in every corner of the world, in Ukraine as well as in Sudan, in Palestine, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and in all the other forgotten wars. There aren't League One and League Two wars in the world. There are only wars that must be stopped now with every effort. The second reason is linked with the actors of this action, the civil society and the area of the Horn of Africa. As you know, in our committee, we have a strong relationship with the African Union Economic and Social and Cultural Council. We participated in the Civil Society and Youth Forum organized prior to the EU and African Union Summit. And we participated in the second edition of the G20 Social Summit with some friends here. And in Johannesburg, as well as inside events organized by the African Union ECOSOC. I had the honor and the privilege to deliver a speech during the summit closing ceremony, which also featured the South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, Brazilian Minister Massaye Maria Evaristo dos Santos, South African Minister Ronald Lamola, and Oxfam Executive Director Amitabh Bihar. G20 Social Summit brought together more than 5,000 participants from a broad spectrum of civil society organizations. It was an amazing event and experience under the main principle of the Social Summit: solidarity, equality, and sustainability. Through our joint and fruitful cooperation with African Union ECOSOC, we sent a message on behalf of the EU and African civil society at the United Nations Summit for the Future. In our joint declaration, we call for a reinvigorated multilateral system, one that is representative, transparent, and accountable, really for all and not for a small number of countries or actors. We advocate for a transparent and efficient United Nations and for restructuring global finance to align with climate goods, moving beyond GDP as the measure of the progress. The global public good, peace, and Africa are at the heart of our agenda in this committee. We will follow your work with great interest, even if I unfortunately will have to be absent due to a previous commitment. I wish you a fruitful meeting. Thank you.
Perhaps just to say that Stefano Palmieri is Italian, no one is perfect, like me, I'm also Italian. He's a trade unionist. He came from one of the three bigger Italian trade unions. He has been a member of the International Trade Union Movement, member of this committee for
2010.
Yeah, 2010, so it means 15 years. Now he's president of the External Relations section, but he's been previously for 5 years president of the economic section when we made a significant change in the approach of the committee on the matter, and many more. So just to say a few words of presentation about Stefano. We are very grateful to him to have hosted as just elected 1 month ago, president of the Economic section. He would have to leave soon, but I will remain with you all the morning until the end.
Yeah, no, it's not up to me.
You are the, you are
Moses.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Your Excellencies. And, we have the two organizations that work in the Horn of Africa on the particular issues that seriously affect the Horn of Africa. So I'm going to hand over to our principals to be able to read the introductions in the conversations. Thank you. Kerri. Thank you.
No, you cannot move.
All right. Your Excellencies, the EU, our partners, colleagues, I think we are very, very honored to be here at the EU. And I also want to emphasize the fact that when I heard you say that Africa is at the heart of the EU's agenda, I think we feel like we are in the right place, and we are here with friends. So my name is Kennedi Akolo, and I work for the American Friends Service Committee as the Regional Director for Africa. Mine is going to be very simple. We are here, two organizations with our partners. There's so many organizations actually, and I'm hoping there'll be a chance for everybody to introduce themselves so that our partners also know who's in the room. I hope so. But the two organizations that have been working together, that's the American Friends Service Committee. We have Kerri Kennedi, who's our Associate General Secretary for International Programs, the Reverend Fidon, Dr. Fidon, who's the General Secretary of the All Africa Conference of Churches in the room. They are our two principals. And on behalf of the team is to say thank you, but also to invite our two principals maybe to make a few remarks before we can get on to the main agenda. So I'll ask Dr. Fidon to say something, and then Kerri to speak. Thank you.
You push.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
Your Excellency, Stefano Palmieri, President, External Relations European Economic Social Committee, Your Excellency, Raduca, yeah, I don't know if I pronounce it correctly.
No, it doesn't matter. I am very used to the creative way. It's French one, so Jaillet.
Distinguished colleagues and esteemed representatives of the European Economic and Social Committee, partners from the American Friends Service Committee, friends and advocates for peace, the whole of Africa, good morning.
Good night.
So on behalf of the All Africa Conference of Churches, I'm honored to join you here at the European Economic and Social Committee for this important gathering. A call for stronger partnership between the whole of Africa and Europe. The Horn of Africa remains one of the most dynamic yet fragile regions on our continent. Across Sudan, South Sudan, Ethiopia, Somalia, Kenya, Djibouti, Somalia, Uganda, and Eritrea, communities are facing overlapping crises that demand coordinated responses. As faith-based organizations, the All Africa Conference of Churches works closely with churches, interfaith actors, youth and women groups, and community mediators to strengthen the foundations of peace, reconciliation, and social cohesion. Our work is rooted in the belief that peace is not just a political process, but it's a moral commitment that must be upheld by all sectors in society. In recent years, through the Horn of Africa Peace Project Consortium, in which AACC works with the American Friends Service Committee and other AACC peace projects, we have invested deeply in a number of things, like one, supporting local peace infrastructure, training church leaders, women mediators, and youth peace actors who are often the first responders in conflict settings. Number two, we have been documenting conflict trends and amplifying community voices through research and platforms like the Horn of Africa Peace Project in the Salama Hub. Number three, we have been providing safe spaces for dialogue across borders, connecting civil society, faith leaders, youth, and policy actors from Sudan, Ethiopia, Somalia, and South Sudan. And also we have been advocating at the AU, IGAD, and continental levels to strengthen inclusive peace processes and ensure that women and youth are recognized as agents of change. Our work in the Horn of Africa has shown a simple truth. Peace is built from the ground up, but it must be sustained through strong principled regional and international partnerships. This is why today's engagement with European counterparts is so meaningful. Europe has long been a partner in humanitarian support and development cooperation. But the moment we face today calls for something deeper, a collaboration that strengthens people-centered governance, supports accountable political transitions, and invests in civil society that is safeguarding hope amidst conflict. Today, conversations are not abstract. They reflect the lived experiences of millions of people, and they mirror the everyday advocacy work that AACC and AFSC undertake with churches, CSO, faith leaders, and communities who continue to mediate, support displaced families, and rebuild trust where the state structures are there. But for those efforts to have a lasting impact, stronger and more strategic cooperation between Europe and the Horn of Africa continues to be necessary. We encourage our European partners to deepen support for community-rooted peace building and dialogue initiatives, protection of civil space and human rights, humanitarian assistance that reaches the most vulnerable, long-term peace building and that strengthens national and regional resilience, youth and women's leadership in mediation, governance, and peace negotiation, as well as research and policy work, such as the Horn of Africa Peace Project, which guides international engagement with grounded evidence. As AACC, we believe that peace is possible and that faith communities, when empowered and supported, are among the strongest and most trusted actors in promoting reconciliation and healing. So allow me to extend our sincere appreciation, the European Economic and Social Committee, and all the partners who have worked tirelessly to bring us together. Your commitment to inclusive, principled engagement with Africa is evident, and we look forward to expanding this collaboration in concrete in transformative ways. I wish you, all of us, fruitful dialogue today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Fidon. Hi, I'm Kerri Kennedy. Thank you for welcoming us today. Good to see you again. Stefano, thank you for hosting us. And I am the Associate General Secretary for the American Foreign Service Committee, a 107-year-old Quaker peace and social justice organization. So I want to not take too much time because we have a wonderful panel here. And what AFSC does exceedingly well, we think, is to convene leaders from around the world, because we know that those closest to conflict, oppression, and violence have solutions to their own problems. And as we see an unprecedented shift globally towards far-right movements of authoritarianism and repression, we know that new partnerships are more important than ever before. AFSC does peacebuilding, migration, and humanitarian work. We're based in the United States, so we have offices in 18 countries, and we have partnerships in 60 countries around the world. We work in some of the most difficult places in Gaza, in Myanmar, and Sudan, supporting communities to find just peace solutions to conflict and oppression and violence. AFSC has done advocacy. This is the third time that we've brought the Salama Hub delegation to a global policy hub. So the first one was in Washington, D.C., and that was 3 years ago. It is a different world today in Washington, D.C., and we are not bringing the group here. We are seeing that with the devastating USAID cuts in this past year, tremendous devastation to communities around the world. We are seeing an immense need for new strengthened multilateral relationships and approaches. Unfortunately, our partners in Sudan and the Horn of Africa can't count on the United States like they once did. And so we hope that out of this really dark place, that we, AFSC, can support bringing partners together in new ways and supporting that, investing in that financially, and finding ways to try to meet the gap that we're seeing coming from the United States. We also will challenge US complicity. So we do advocacy ourselves against our government. We're trying to form partnerships here in Europe, but we're also standing against authoritarianism, repression, violence, and violation of human rights in the United States. So you have a wonderful panel here. It's my privilege to work with AACC. You have our amazing team. I thank Federica, who's our EU liaison, for being the one that puts this all together, and Moses and Kennedy, our leaders from the Africa region. This really is the Salama Hub, and this delegation is the example of the work that AFSC is so proud of around the world. So it's our privilege to be here. It's our privilege to bring you all together to speak with policymakers. And with that, thank you. Thank you for hosting us. And I'll see if Moses just wants to say a few words before we go into the panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kerri. Okay, Mr. Great. So, Your Excellencies, good morning, and thank you for giving us the space to be able to interact here today with you. My name is Moses Chasies. I'm the director for the Salama Hub, which is the Horn of Africa Advocacy Research Program for Policy Influencing. So we work together with the All Africa Conference of Churches, and this program was developed out of seeking alternative ways of engaging in the Horn of Africa. That is a region that has gone through decades of instability and climate shocks that have actually affected people in different ways. And again, we recognize the presence of many actors for these decades in the Horn of Africa. But again, the question we ask ourselves is why the persistence in these issues in the Horn of Africa? As such, these organizations came together and wanted to use an alternative approach which is undertaking research into the critical issues that affect these countries in the Horn of Africa. That was the aim of this program, and digging into these issues also meant working with actors, local actors, which means we had to look into those actors, local civil society in the Horn of Africa, but also looking at how to engage with religious leaders that had a better understanding on these contexts. So for us, it was about bringing these actors together across the 8 countries, but also ensuring that we could together have their skills enhanced in conflict analysis to be able to understand the root causes, but also in advocacy and research. As such, the work we do is evidence-based, moving from the research that we've done together with these actors to be able to amplify the research findings into 3 policy spaces. First in Africa, the African Union, the European Union that we're here today, and also the United States that Kerri has just alluded how challenging it is looking today. But we're also looking at how can we be more adaptive in the US space, but we have to do this. Today, we have about 85 civil society across the Horn of Africa and about 30 faith denominations with whom we're working. And this is hope that is going to continuously be increasing. So we've been able to think together and identify areas of research with these civil society that we have. Some of them here, about 8 of them from these countries today, and about 3 religious leaders, to see how we can identify the real areas of engaging. As such, we've done this, and we've been able to come up with a number of research, one being exactly on the youth contribution to peace and stability in the Horn of Africa, women inclusion in the processes, but also looking at issues to address historical injustices, which serve as the root causes for these issues in the Horn of Africa. And as such, Sudan remains a case for all of us today for more than 2 years. So for us, we want to see how we can really find the issues. This said, these are just excerpts. We have the voices. It's not the voices of the American Foreign Service Committee and the All Africa Conference of Churches, but it's the voices of the civil society from the ground through the research, and we want to see how we can really be able to amplify these voices in these spaces. So we will be listening to these actors from the ground, and we hope that we can talk about some of the issues in Sudan today, but we also want to reflect around the gap that exists in women participation in mediation and negotiation. Because of the context, we find that continuously women have not really been part of the conversation in terms of identifying solutions to either ceasefire agreements or peace agreements that have to come into play. And even then, how do we ensure that interventions, initiatives within these contexts are gender sensitive? As such, we've been able to undertake these different efforts. And I feel that being here today is a great opportunity because we want to be able to show these evidences that have come from the research. And this can also, we also recognize that the context has continuously been changing, which calls for us to be more agile. So this said, I think I want to give the space to see whether we can listen to the voices. Thank you.
Yes.
Yes. And we're just making sure our first panelist here.
So the first panel is on Sudan with Salwa Elsadik and Pauline Muchina. And for the people who are following from their offices or home, hopefully you will be able to ask questions during the Q&A as if you were here. Ladies.
What is going on? Please, 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 please tell us. Tell us.
It will start automatically when you speak.
Thank you for giving me the floor to speak at this critical moment for Sudan. A moment when silence costs lives. Excellencies, colleagues, as we gather here in safety and dignity, a mother in Darfur is searching for water among the ruins, and a girl is being raped. Sudan today faces famine, mass atrocities, and the collapse of the state, and territorial fragmentation. The suffering of the Sudanese women in their homes, on the move, and in the refugee camps is beyond what words can convey. They endure sexual violence, slavery, hunger, and daily exploitation. They are abducted, tortured, forced into sexual slavery, and most cases remains unreported and undocumented. Women human rights defenders and aid workers continue under unimaginable pressure, often without pay, without protection or recognition. For them, there is simply no safe place left. I went in Sudan in October and I had to run for my life. I say this with deep personal pain and witness. I saw a woman give birth under a tree. No midwife, no medicine, no dignity, only raw survival. In my extended family, a young woman was gang raped to death in her home. One woman was forced to cook for the militia, while in the next room, her 4 young daughters were being brutally assaulted. And a woman from Darfur, raped as a teenage 23 years ago, was raped again, but this time alongside her 19-year-old daughter by the same perpetrator. So let's be clear, this is not only gender-based violence. It is deliberate use as weapon of war. And it is racialized sexual violence targeting Darfurian women. And they call them Durga, which is black in Arabic. So if the world allows this to go unpunished, it will normalize the sexual violence as a legitimate weapon of war, not only in Sudan, but globally. And it is especially painful that this regression unfolds as the world marks 25 years of UN Security Council Resolution 1325, a milestone that should have signaled progress and not profound loss. We raise our voices and we amplify those on the ground, but we must ask firmly, how do we make local and international authorities truly committed to protecting these lives? Because the war in Sudan is not contained, it is regional. Across borders, the consequences spill off. In Chad, families arrive after walking 7 days without food. In South Sudan, refugees told us armed groups crossed the border the same day they did. Big suffering in Uganda, Ethiopia, Kenya, and Egypt. While arms and gold smuggling move faster than humanitarian aid. So if Sudan collapses fully, the Horn of Africa and the Sahel will not be able to absorb this shock. So I ask you as policymakers and allies to not let Sudan become the ignored crisis of our time. Your decision in Brussels can open humanitarian corridors in Darfur. Your political leverage can protect a girl in Kurdistan. Your leadership can prevent another genocide. And your support to women-led, community-rooted organizations can keep a nation from falling apart. Sudanese women must be supported to take their rightful place to the peace negotiation table. Earlier this year, the American Friend Service Committee, AFSC, conducted one of the rare large-scale qualitative studies inside Sudan, which farmers, teachers, youth, religious leaders, women networks, and displaced families. Their findings reveal the human truth of this war. And let me bring you into the human story behind these findings. In West Darfur, Amazon told us her children had not seen food aid in months because the front lines keep shifting. She said, we don't need promises. We need the guns to stop so food can come through. So is the bleed of the real ceasefire. We hear bullets. One woman told us that we hear bullets less often than we hear our children crying from hunger. So starvation is being used as a weapon of war. GBV survivors need healing and not silence. In a neighboring country, I was in November in a neighboring country to Sudan. I met a refugee family whose young daughter was pregnant from there. Her parents told me that they had accepted the baby and would raise it with dignity. But when I spoke to the girl, they left her head. She said, I'm just staying in my room because I can't face my parents. I'm trying to be brave, but inside I'm completely broken. So healing is needed as food. A health worker told that every day we treat women who carry wounds they can't speak about. So GBV response must be survivor-centered and locally anchored. So the weapons destroying Sudan do not originate in Sudan. Communities said clearly, cut the flow of arms, cut the money lines. They asked the EU to enforce arms embargoes and hold war profiteers accountable. Naming and shaming. Naming and shaming the United Arab Emirates that fueling this war. Diplomacy must become coherent and inclusive. AFSC heard the same message everywhere. The world is negotiating in too many rooms, while too few Sudanese in. Sudanese communities want the European Union to help harmonize mediation efforts and ensure women and youth who lead grassroots peace efforts are not excluded from the political negotiation shaping the future. So our refugees in the neighboring countries or wherever, they are not just numbers. They are youth scattered across borders, across Chad, South Sudan, Ethiopia, Kenya, and Egypt. Mothers fear their children will never see classrooms again. So the borders are bleeding in Eastern Sudan also. A local leader said, our borders are open to everything except protection. Communities are calling for coordinated cross-border mechanism to curb arms smuggling, human trafficking, and extremist infiltration. And we must not forget the information frontline. A young woman journalist told us, disinformation kills. It makes neighbors fear each other. Sudanese communities ask also the European Union to support local media, train youth communicators, and promote conflict-sensitive reporting. Excellencies, Sudanese civilians are exhausted, but they are not broken. They deserve protection and they deserve for their suffering not to be ignored simply because the crisis is complex or politically inconvenient. If the EU champions the findings of this AFSC research, Sudanese communities will feel seen and they will remember who stood with them. And history will remember that Europe chose to stand with humanity and not with the logic of war. Thank you.
Let's just take a minute and process what our sister just shared. If we had time, we wouldn't even do any more presentation after what she just said, because it is painful. People are dying. People are being starved to death. Over 10 million people currently displaced. It is the scale of this catastrophe demands immediate action, not only from civil society groups, but groups such as European Union and other governments around the world. When you hear that 18 million people are facing hunger, when you hear about women who have been raped, when you hear that millions of women and girls are exposed to sexual violence and starvation on a daily basis, how can we be comfortable with that information? Behind these statistics is a mother, is a child, is a father, it's a brother. We just spent a week in Kampala with women who came from Sudan, with women who came from Chad, refugee camp, Uganda. And all they were telling us is how painful it is to watch their loved ones die. Some of them in El Fasher were buried alive. Alive. And they ask us, when will the world ever listen to us? And all we could say to them, we are sorry, we are doing what we can as AFSC to try and stand in solidarity with you. And they asked, what is that solidarity? How many times do we hear about solidarity? Governments making public resolutions. European Union last week made a resolution on Sudan. Will it just be on paper or will it save these women? AFSC Africa region advances a non-violent Sudan-centered peace agenda grounded in civilian leadership. Remember that these governments, these military groups are the ones that are committing genocide, are committing atrocities, and yet when it comes to negotiating, civilians are not brought to the table. Women who are suffering, youth who are suffering are not brought to the table. It is these guns, military leaders, who are brought to the table. Was Hitler brought to the table to negotiate? Why do we abuse these women and children in Sudan by negotiating with the same people who are killing them? As Salwa stated, Salama Hub does research. The research includes documenting arms flows, the political economy of the war, and the role of external actors such as UAE, Egypt, others, including European governments that are supplying weapons to UAE. And in turn, UAE is funding genocide in Sudan. Those governments need to be held accountable. We do advocacy. We engage the African Union, IGAD, United Nations, USA, and also political governments. We urge a ceasefire and a unified mediation process, stronger arms embargo. That's where we have failed as an international community. We urge for accountability for external actors that fuels the war. And we urge for exclusion of women and youth and displaced communities in peace efforts. We mobilize communities, the faith-based community, both in Africa and also in the US, where we operate and other parts of the world. We do peaceful protests. We do diaspora organizing and public petitions. And currently, we are collaborating on a campaign to urge the NBA, the sports organization, to cut their relationship with United Emirates because of their genocide support. This is a petition that is requiring 10,000 signatures, and we are distributing it all over the United States and other parts of the world. We do humanitarian and social support. PK, you did work in Ethiopia. What did you do with Sudanese?
Speak.
Just speak.
It will work when you speak. AI.
Yeah, thank you. So, I'm Pauline Kamau. We have worked with Sudan. And how I remember is how we tried to rescue women from Sudan we are working with. And during the war, and they had to walk. LENSA, we were working with LENSA, that is the Ethiopian Women Lawyers Association, to ensure safety passage for them. The horrible stories they told us were really something you cannot even talk about. They had to walk for days. And when they reached the Ethiopia border, they found that the visa was raised, so they had to pay much more to enter Ethiopia. Then entering Ethiopia, they were still not safe. So they were still looking for other passages. AFSC kept them gave them host, and we worked with them for a few months before they resettled in Egypt. And in Egypt, they could not actually stay for long because immediately you leave Egypt, you have to pay $2,500 to get back to Egypt. They ended up in the war-torn country of Sudan.
Unfortunately, that's what's going on. Even in Uganda, in refugee camps, it's the same thing. So we are here now to talk to European Union, to urge you to coordinate with regional bodies such as Africa Union, IGAN, and have a coordination mechanism to unify and call for a ceasefire now. Protect civilians, give them access to humanitarian aid, strengthen arms embargo and enforcement, and protect all humanitarian access. People are starving while lorries are in the borders. Food is rotting in the borders instead of saving lives that are dying in the countries. We want to see meaningful inclusion of youth and women. We want to see investment in long-term stabilization, including trauma healing and rebuilding basic human services in Sudan. Sudan civilians have shown extraordinary resilience. Women negotiating local ceasefires, youth organizing humanitarian help, and families supporting one another. But resilience alone cannot stop genocide. It cannot end the flow of weapons. The European Union has both the power and moral obligation to act. A principled coordinated response grounded in civilian voices and aligned with African institutions will end this strategy and lay the foundation for lasting peace. History will judge us. Did we save lives in Sudan, or we watched as millions of people's lives got devastated? AFSC remains firmly committed to Sudan's people and to building a future rooted in justice, dignity, and nonviolence. We look forward to discussing further with your excellencies to see how we can bring hope to these communities in Sudan. Thank you.
Now we open the Q&A. For the ones that are following us online, please write in the chat or raise your hand. Yep. No, it's hard to do Q&A after your two powerful interventions, I have to say.
sorry to take the floor again, but we would like to hear from your excellencies, please, if there is any thing you can share about the resolution you made on Sudan last week, please.
But you should know that Europe is a complex machinery, but Federica is a master of card in this. And so this is the body that represent at large European civil society, business community, trade unions, agriculture, and many more. And we are a consultative body, so we have not a legislative power. And the body that has adopted a good resolution finally is the European Parliament. That doesn't mean even nothing. It's important, but the resolution of a parliament doesn't mean action. Is a political standing, is more powerful than a resolution of the committee. So we should be grateful to them. We have not been capable up to now to put a focus on this. We should work a little more. But even the resolution doesn't change so much because the political commitment in the matter of foreign affairs, as Federica, she wrote a lot of books on this, knows, is completely in the power of the council, of the government. And for what I know up to now, yes, any foreign affairs council also 1 week ago, I think, or other format of the council. I don't know if the summit of head of state and never taken some, but in the Foreign Affairs Council or the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the 27 are sitting, take position, is part of the conclusion, but that's all. And so unfortunately, I do not expect, and I say very unfortunately, much more action. As you see already, Europe has been completely aside in the crisis of Gaza and Middle East, although we make a lot of statement and we are very much engaged. We were the first donor in Palestine, both Cisjordania and both Gaza. We are now very active with the Pact of the Mediterranean, just relaunched yesterday in Barcelona, entering into force 1 week ago. Finally, we are the menu on the table of the crisis in Ukraine. That is just close to us because the holder of the table are completely others. So I do see from the foreign policy and the geopolitical action of Europe today is the weakest moment, although by the power of money and humanitarian aid, today Europe is by far the first actor after US aid has completely cut any aid. But I hope it will be only a moment of transition to take stock of this. Of course, in the statement, in the meeting, also in the meeting of European Union with the African Union, also this big crisis as other situations are on the table, are discussed, but as you have said, stop paper. We do need action, and this, I can say, are a little more in the fog.
Yeah, and you shall re-ask the question tomorrow when we go to the parliament. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, we have a question from the audience online, Emma and Gang. The question is, regional economic communities and regional mechanism are the building blocks for peace that the AU relies on trickle down to member state level. What have been they engaging in and what is their approach in the region?
Thank you, Moses.
Thank you so much for the question. The first entry point we do is working with, engaging with IGAD, which we've been able to really be in contact with officials of IGAD and also being able to amplify some of the findings that we have gone through in this region, particularly in Sudan. But at the same time, as I said in my introduction, I talked about the engagement with the African Union, which is one of the policy spaces that we're engaging with. And this year in June, we were able to hold an African Union Advocacy Week, during which we met with the Peace and Security Commission of the AU. And we were able to amplify some of these things. And we went to specific embassies, including the Embassy of Sudan, where we were able to also listen to what they feel and what they feel was not well done. And we've been able to bring this up to the different diplomacies in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. So these are things that we are doing, but we recognize that we also need to work with the East African community. That is one of the regional bodies that can also influence this. But already the fact that we're engaging with the IGAD and with the African Union is also a great opportunity for us to see how Sudan can also be part of the conversation, because we realize that Sudan is not on the table. So we want to ensure that they are part of that conversation and seeing how we can continuously engage and move them forward. So we recognize the place of this.
And also, from Washington, D.C., the civil society groups have been pushing the U.S. government to include AU in negotiations on Sudan, because they've completely excluded Africa Union at the table. They are mainly negotiating with Middle East countries, the Gulf nations, and Africa Union is not at the table. So how do you discuss Africa and not have Africa Union at the table? And not even the civil society groups from the region are not included. It's just the governments in the Gulf and the United States. So civil society groups have even written to the United Nations saying that United Nations need to control the negotiations rather than just leaving bilateral countries to do that. And if they bring, other people to the table, Africa Union should be there, IGAD should be there, civil society groups, especially women and youth, should be there as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There are no more questions from.
Can I add?
Yeah, go.
I want to add the fact that Sudan, I think the Sudan government itself, the one that I guess is recognized, which is the government of the General in Port Sudan, pulled out of both the EU and the IGAD. And that's why they're not part of the negotiations. And for me, this is where I see an opportunity, especially for EU coming in more as a non-partisan support of differences. Because what is there again, if you go deep into the conversations that we've just had, we've had the issues around a racist approach to the atrocities that are being committed. And then what Pauline is saying is that the negotiations have been moved to the Arab world. And so the African part of it is really not available on the table. What I'm saying is that I think this is where EU can come in and support. I know both generals, I don't know whether it's both, but I know the general in charge of government is not part of the AU process, is not part of the Intergovernmental Authority on Development process. So they are completely outside of these regional bodies, which makes it quite a challenge again for us. Thank you.
And meanwhile, we have two more comments / questions. One is Rossano from CNR. Dear all, Europe need to listen to the voice of the EU people, of CSOs, scientists, professors, young people, stakeholders. As a person engaged in the process of Med and Africa dialogue, I see a lot of paper and a lot of working groups, but we need more than this in the actual context. And then Emma, who I've also asked a question before, she has a question: how have these civil society representatives present here partnered and collaborated with each other, or they just focus on parallel implementations? So who wants to come in?
Okay. So Salwa will talk about some of the civil society in Sudan and what they are doing with the situation. I did talk about the international civil society, and Moses talked about what they are doing in the region. but it would be good to hear directly from a Sudanese who is actually working in Sudan via other civil society groups say what they are doing.
Okay. For the civil society, if we focus on the local initiatives and the women-led organization and the CBOs, they are really filling the gaps of the collapse of the state. So there is no services, there is no infrastructure now in Sudan. So they are taken over by providing food, creating community kitchens, and making shift clinics, and some girls walking from door to door to help on serving the communities, and also arranging for medications and fighting malaria and dengue fever and collapse of the health system. So they are the de facto government in Sudan now, women-led organizations especially. So I'm leading one of these organizations. We are working hard just to get the community, to hold the community not to be fragmented. And there is much hate speech, there is polarization, and ethnicity is rising now very high in Sudan. So we are mediating local conflicts and trying, to make some informal education, because now the students almost 3 years without formal education. So we are trying to fill the gaps of urgency in the falling state.
If I can complement that, the point is that we have brought civil societies from the different countries into networks within the countries. And being into networks, it gives us a more opportunity, leverage to be able to engage with them and strengthening their understanding around the issues within the context. But at the same time, I talked from the beginning of 85 civil society organizations. These are all distributed in these 8 countries. But now when the context becomes challenging, we have to seek alternative ways of engaging with these civil societies. Like the case of Sudan, we were able to take them out of Sudan to actually have these kind of dialogue, where we also build strategies on how they can engage back within their context. At the same time, not only physically bringing them together, but we also engage virtually on different platforms where we can have exchanges with the civil society from the different countries. But in such moments where we need to go into global level advocacy, we have to go within each context and pick 1 or 2 civil society that will come into this global space where we can be able to have the conversations that will be trickled back upon the end of such conventions, dialogue and engagements. They take this back to the networks within the countries. So there's really a strong engagement at the country level, but we recognize the challenges within difficult contexts that we need to be adaptive in the way we engage with these societies. Thank you.
And groups such as Darfur Action Women Group is always in Geneva, in New York, at AU, and many other civil society groups that are Sudan-led, even some of them based in Europe. And we recognize the work that they've been doing. Sometimes it's petitions, sometimes it's protest, sometimes it's just, presenting at the General Assembly in New York, like during the report, the Special Rapporteur on Gender-Based Violence for the UN. They were involved in that. So we recognize the work that civil society groups from Sudan itself, are doing, and very, very appreciative of their work. Thank you.
I just want to add one point, that one of the significant work we are doing as women-led organizations is providing the psychosocial support for the GBV survivors, and this is very, big efforts, and also the trauma healing, and trying to help also pregnant women understand of. So the GBV is spreading in Sudan, and we are providing psychosocial support
from here. So.
And we have two more questions. One is Ruth Watson from ACT EU. Have you as faith actor found openness from the diplomatic actors of the EU and governments to engage with the priorities you set out now? What would you see as the priorities for faith leaders in Europe to strategically support these efforts? And then there is Victoria Garcia Guillen from the European Parliament. In practical terms, how can the EU convince both parties in to the conflict and the Quad to include the EU, REX, but also civil society in the negotiations? We don't have the power or leverage or legitimacies to impose it. So how to convince? Those are very thoughtful questions.
That's a very good question. The easy one is the faith community, because I think the faith community is one of the organizations or entities that is present even now in Sudan. With Dr. Fidon here, he can tell you there are churches operating inside Sudan, and what AFSC, All Africa Conference of Churches, is also doing in the region, in the Africa region. When it comes to the United States, where I work, we do work with them. We are in coalitions with them. These petitions I'm talking about, even the NBA petition, they are working with us. They are signing these letters. They are educating their communities, because one of the big issues is lack of education on what is happening in Sudan, because the mainline media doesn't have that, day-to-day education for communities. So we are challenging the faith community to be the educator or the awareness raising of what is happening to the people of Sudan. So here in Europe, I know some of the faith communities like Christian Aid that actually provide aid in Sudan, but they are also involved in advocating at the EU level, and also in their own parliaments, like the UK government, which actually came up with a statement on Sudan very recently. So the faith community, for me, is one of our allies, and we should even do more with them than we are doing. So when it comes to convincing, this is long term, and it cannot be done just immediately. But first of all, I know Moses wants to jump in, so maybe I should.
No, it's fine. I was looking more.
Men won't always jump in the conversation.
But I think, for me, you cannot convince entities like EU in a day. So it is work, in progress. Every time we have an opportunity, like now we are here to talk to them, to share with them, and not only educate, but to challenge them for remaining silent while a genocide is taking place. So we have to continue to agitate, to protest, to have quiet diplomacy behind the scenes, and to write this petition, and to also have one-on-one meetings with specific governments. We've been doing that in DC with some of the European governments. But now we even need to do it here. We need to do it every platform which is available for us. But, we are still, for me, not only from AFSC, but also for me on a personal note, EU has so much moral obligation on what is happening in Sudan because of the legacy of colonization in Sudan and in so many conflicts in Africa. If we don't take that responsibility, the European Union will have failed in terms of, not paying back, but actually rectifying some of the mistakes that were committed during colonialization. Thank you.
I wanted to add to the question around legitimacy of the EU to say that we already recognizing that it's not just about the legitimacy, but it's also about the willingness to support groups at the local level. Here I'm talking of women-led civil society organizations, youth-led civil society organizations, that following the work that we are doing as strategic allies on the Horn of Africa, we feel that there's the need for more support that could go into these actors at a local level that can catalyze change from bottom up to being able to influence the situation in Sudan. And let's not forget the way it all started from the beginning in the change of the government that was from the ground. So we find that there is need for more investment at the local level to these organizations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think you addressed the elephant in the room, right? That's reality. And yeah, there's another question.
An elephant. It's a panda to say.
Colonialism is the elephant in the room. Wait here. We have another question from Emma. Youth remain central when it comes to conflict. How have these actors mainstream youth peace and security agenda in their initiative, meaningful engagement, or a box leaking strategy? We can also hear from a youth representative present here and the challenges they face. I think this is a perfect question to start our next panel, because that is going to be on women and youth inclusion in mediation negotiations. So we will answer live in the next panel. You want to say something?
I want to ask one question, if we can.
Yeah, you can, of course.
Yes, of course, there should be, as you are saying, this needed mobilization worldwide, United Nations, that are so weak in this moment, and European Union that seems too much lost this new game of power. But there are also regional actors, political ones. We mentioned just before the role of Egypt, this affair, although is one. But I want also to raise other, not elephant, but perhaps lion or something like that. What's the role of South Sudan in this game? Because South Sudan was the previous disaster, and still with a lot of refugees in the countries around. Is part of this conflict, is completely out of this conflict, is more an internal conflict of the North Sudan, completely divided, of the failure of the government in Khartoum. What's the role of Ethiopia? If I'm not mistaken, I've not heard the name of this other old big empire and strong country that is the border country to the two. So are they playing in this conflict? Are they completely aside? Are they watchers try not to be involved? What role they can play in this respect?
So whenever there is conflict, and I know Moses will also add, whenever there is conflict, it's the neighboring countries are brought in whether they like it or not. And right now, refugees are flowing from Sudan into South Sudan. As PK talked about, from Sudan into Ethiopia, from Sudan to Egypt. Okay, so they are playing host nations, for refugees. The other thing is they are part of the African Union, you see. So the conversations that are going on in the AU, they are involved. But we also know that they've taken sides. For example, Egypt has taken a side. Ethiopia goes back and forth. South Sudan is not clear which side they support. So it is,
both, perhaps.
You don't know whom they support. But what we know is that the conflict is actually going even to spill even further than just the neighboring nation and cover the whole Horn of Africa. And then it will be even more devastating. And for EU, actually, there is also self-interest in helping what is happening in Sudan because of the groups that form into that region that become so dangerous to the rest of the world. Right now, there is nobody to control those groups. So they will end up causing havoc beyond the Horn of Africa to the rest of the world if the EU and other governments, the UN, don't interfere. So, but from our advocacy group in Washington, D.C., we've written to the Africa Union asking how they are bringing these other countries to the table to make a decision. As it was said, Sudan is kind of out of the system right now, but we are trying to push them back into the system so that they can not only be held accountable, but be helped in the process. Do you have any?
Okay, can I?
And Salwa.
Salwa.
Yeah.
Salwa also.
Just to highlight that Sudan, even before the war eruption, Sudan was under sanctions since 1989. So that means the situation is bad in terms of economic and also politics. So the engagement with AU and also with IGAD and some regional efforts was not really smooth. So that also contribute to putting Sudan in terms of foreign policy in very fragile situation.
Thank you. I wanted to look at the issue of arms flow and the role of neighboring countries. I think there's a lot of research and studies that have been carried out. I was watching one where they've been able to track, the open jeeps and the machine guns and all that flowing through Libya and then into Sudan. If you remember, there's a gentleman, I don't know whether to call him a gentleman, but there's a killer called Abu Lulu.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, I don't know whether the EU is aware about him. And they were able to track, where all his, the weapons were coming in. I think through General Haftar, who's also involved in Libya to some extent. And you can see that these weapons, all we need to do is to identify where are these weapons coming from. I think UAE has been mentioned. The governments like the Kenya government, for instance, which is much further, that have also been accused of supporting the RSF. And the RSF met in Nairobi to decide or to plan on the future of Sudan. At some point. To the regional economic groups before it comes to the first attempts on the first trials, I think under the principle of subsidiarity for Sudan, IGAD should have been the main vehicle, to try and solve that. But Sudan is no longer part of IGAD, so pushes it to a completely different level. So I think it's just a response. But the entire region, they're in Somalia, then all those places, where they're challenges. So I think it's really worth, taking a bit of time just to see, the role of external forces in pushing, the neighbors to react the way they react.
Yes, and also Ethiopia playing host to the regional bodies like the AU, the IGAD. But one actor we're not talking about is the United Nations with the special envoy office. But at the same time, the EU special envoy to the AU is also within the same city, and seeing how these conversations can really move on. So I think also I have looked at the National Development Plan of Ethiopia and the government with the Ministry of Peace, not only looking at peace for Ethiopia, but peace across the region, which is something that I was really talking about, commending them for having thought that there could be feel of many
especially for AU. Why? Because of the regime that came in, they said it was almost like a coup, so they pushed it out. But we should also face it at the AU and IGAD level. We need to sustain advocacy to ensure that Sudan is really part of the Africa region. So why are they keeping quiet? Why don't they actually intervene? But of course, as Kennedy has said, is this idea of non-interference when something like that is happening. It is about time we need also to go to the AU and say, enough is enough, you need to do something. Because they are actually very quiet about it. They pushed Sudan out. So Sudan is literally, they cannot literally do anything about Sudan. It's about time they bring it back to the fold and be a member of the African Union again.
In October this year, there was a report that some of the armored cars that were fighting with RSF were from France, and some of the European governments actually have been implicated, as I said earlier. And then the other largest culprit is Russia, especially through the Wagner Group. Now they call themselves something else. I don't remember the name, but they are causing havoc. When you hear communities being burnt alive, they are even Russia, is a country that is very challenging. Everybody knows about that. But, Europe cannot just be silent when Russia is causing havoc in the world. It's not just Sudan, it's also in West Africa. And they are really like in the DRC, they are causing havoc. So when we are talking about what can EU do, and I know that, when you have a child who is a bully, it's really hard to hold them accountable. In this case, Russia, but I think we cannot ignore what Russia is doing in Africa. Thank you.
It's a big bully.
He's a big bully, yes.
The problem is also that the EU does not talk to Russia at any level, including in the Horn of Africa. They don't talk. So how can you influence an actor you do not talk to? I think with time to go to the next panel, thank you very much. This was very interesting. So the next panel is on women and youth involvement in mediation and peace negotiations, which is, sorry, I have a problem with my computer. Okay, so we have Yoal, Lydia, and Lensa. Who's going to go first?
People want a short break, Federica, is it possible?
Sorry?
A short break for people.
I think they might just have to get up on their.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
So i privati meders devono definire
2 minutes break.
Ich kann Coffee
Those who want can be participating, but
because it will be very disturbing for the people walking.
Okay.
Let's take just 1 minute, 2 minutes break.
5 minutes.
Yeah, 5 minutes break. For the people following us online, we will take a very short break, and then we will resume. Okay. Let's go. You can go, Lenta.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
address you today on the issue that's not only urgent, but also foundational on building sustainable peace and system Horn of Africa, which is the meaningful participation and inclusion of women in negotiation, mediation, and peacebuilding processes. Allow me to begin with a story that reflects not both the extraordinary contribution of women in our region and the profound barriers they continue to face. In northern Ethiopia, in Tigray region, a young woman, which I will call with her name Miriam, was once a teacher and community organizer. Before conflict erupted in her community, she led groups of girls, teaching them about their rights, their confidence, and how to protect themselves from gender-based violence. She was part of the well-known Yofono movement, which fought courageously for gender equality and gender-based violence against women for long, even before the war. When conflict erupted, Miriam was forced to flee. She walked for days, losing family members along the way and witnessing horrors no one should ever endure. She arrived at the displacement camp, which is an IDP camp, with nothing but her determination. Yet, even in that place of fear and uncertainty, Miriam rose. She organized a safe space for women and girls. She could document cases of missing persons. She mediated disputes over scarce food and water. She helped survivors of violence access support and offered psychological and first aid to those traumatized by the war. She built trust, community, and hope at the time when institutions around her has collapsed. But when formal peace talks started, later took place, which took place in Pretoria, no one called Miriam. No one asked for her knowledge, her experience, or her insights, despite the fact that she had been doing the work of peace long before the negotiation began. When I visited the IDP camp, she asked me one simple question. We kept the community alive during the war. Why are we kept outside the room when this is discussed? Your Excellencies, this is not only Miriam's story. This is a story of countless women in Somalia, Sudan, South Sudan, Kenya, Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Djibouti. Women who hold communities together yet remain structurally excluded from the process that determines their future. Just to give you a bit of context, according to a recent study conducted by All African Conference of Church and American French Service Committee. By the way, these are organizations who are engaged in peace efforts in our region, and I thank them for that. The first findings of the studies that these two organizations has conducted, it says that women are the first responders during crisis and the mediators of local conflicts, the protectors against radicalization, the provider of humanitarian assistance, and the guardian of social cohesion. And yet, women remain vastly underrepresented in formal negotiations and mediation teams, in ceasefire monitoring, in transitional justice mechanism, and in national and regional peace structures across the region. But not only in our region, but it's a global phenomenon. We also have resolutions, legal framework, which we all know, the UN Security Council, the resolution on 1325, the AU WPS agenda, the Maputo Protocol, all the continental result frameworks that we put, including the national action plans that each region should adopt following the resolution 1325. Unfortunately, the exclusion of women, regardless of us having frameworks globally, the exclusion of women in peace and negotiation process continued. And I don't feel like it's accidental. It's a political barrier, shrinking space, discriminatory norms, lack of funding, and at times deliberate silencing. But we also know this process, peace agreements that include women are more durable, more inclusive, and more effective. When women are at the table, communities are heard and peace lasts. With this, I want to have a key asks for the European Union. One will be to ensure full participation in this process,
European Union using the diplomatic leverage to insist the inclusion of women groups, young women leaders, and survivor mentors in negotiation and mediation and monitoring. The other one is to provide flexible and accessible fundings for grassroots women peace builders, simplifying requirements so community-led organizations can access resources. Protecting women and girls in conflict, prioritizing prevention in response to gender-based violence, supporting survivors and centered services. Making gender inclusion a condition for partnership. For example, linking political and financial compressions to measurable by progress. And supports national and regional action plans, which I mentioned earlier, the UN Security Council Resolution 1725, and we have to strengthen and accountability and resourcing IGAD and member states as well. The last one will be protecting civic space and ensuring women peace builders, journalists, and human rights defenders can operate safely and freely. Your Excellencies, women like Miriam are not waiting for peace. They are already building it quietly, courageously, and even in every single day. When what they need now is for political and financial system to recognize their value and support their leadership. The European Union's long-standing commitment to gender equality positions it as a critical part in ensuring women across East and Horn of Africa are not just present, but influential in shaping peace. Because ultimately, there can be no sustainable peace without women at the table. Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
That is not here, so yeah, you're next. Yes, go ahead, please.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. External relations. For coming here actually to listen to the grassroots voices coming from the whole of Africa. We call you all quote, peace and human rights activists. I also call myself as a true stellar because I come from the grassroots where all these challenges that we are talking about are there. I'm also very excited because there was a question that was asked by one of the participants who is online there about the youth inclusion and also the implementation of the YPs, the 2250 mission, in which South Sudan actually became one of the first countries in the whole and East Africa to adopt the UN Security Council 2250 on youth peace and security strategy. I want to talk a little bit about the youth inclusion in negotiation and mediation. And by pointing out that, I also want to insight a little bit about my journey. How did I get myself, into the space? As you know that South Sudan went back to war in 2013 after 1 year of independence. And people were actually mobilizing themselves by that time. Young people, especially youth, were mobilizing by political actors to join the faction. And they went to Ethiopia, Republican, that side of Gambia, where also mobilized a number of young people, who some of them now are generals, major generals. And in 2014, they reached out to me. It was my fear group, where majority of them went to the battlefield and they did not return until today. I have a number of names. Some of them stayed together. They did not come back again because of the war. So I refused to join the armed group in 2014. And I choose
the rights fight, which we are all here for. I chose to be a non-violent actor in 2014, and that was the year actually I started my activity. It's not because I was actually trying to be smart, but I thank God gave me wisdom at that time to allow me actually to say no to violence. As a youth activist, we also have been facing a lot of challenges when it comes to, because for me, you tell the truth. And I have always have a one say here that when did the international community end the passive diplomacy on the issues that are affecting humanity? Because we've been talking about the issues that are affecting all these countries. From Europe, we have Ukraine here. You go to Middle East, we have Gaza and Palestine. You go to other countries, we have Sudan, we have South Sudan, we have DR Congo. Here in Era, we've been talking about how should we end those things. But to me, I think that we need to move away from being passive in engaging with these political actors. In 2018, actually, young people, the 2018 peace agreement was signed in South Sudan with the help of African Union and IGAD in Ethiopia and entered in Sudan in Khartoum, whereby so many young people actually, I was part of those who participated. I did not participate actually in the room, but we were outside and we created a WhatsApp group where we contribute to our representative who was there. And also, it was not easy task for all of us because the political manipulation also was huge among the young people because of the challenges that they have got, because economically they are not stable enough, they are not well educated, and their understanding also on the issues is very limited. So it actually leads majority of young people to be manipulated by political class. So today, if we are talking about youth inclusion in negotiation, and it is something that's very vital to all of us, because with enormous years of experience in this field, we came to realize that young people were not actually being participated fully. And we have something also called tokenism, where young people are just brought to the room and they're not actually giving a fair share. They were just there they are sitting there as a symbolic, where they say yes to everything, they follow the fact because they were not included. So to me, recently in Ethiopia, there was a peace deal that was signed in Victoria, in South Sudan, where it was very hard for young people actually to participate in. And young people were doing enormous works on the ground. And when the peace agreement talks began, the political actors was actually talking about fair share. What should we get here? And majority of young people actually, they don't know that. They are just there for humanity. They are just there for peace campaign. So it was hard actually to them to get themselves on those tables. So here, if we are talking about the youth inclusion, I think the element of YPS, which is the Youth Peace and Security, will come in. And I'm very excited because I've been following also the European Union Commission on Youth Peace and Security, which they were having, they held a conference last month, if I'm not mistaken, where some young people also from my country came here to represent us. It showed that also, the European Union is committed itself, the youth participation in peace building and conflict resolution. I just want to also emphasize more on the challenges that are facing the youth on the ground. And as majority will agree with me that the limited resources is one of them actually that make young people not to participate in this. We'll find out that they are too vulnerable, they are too naive when it comes to decision regarding to the resources. So it's very hard for them. The most important also that I want to emphasize more is limited knowledge on the 2250, which is the YPS that Nigeria took. And that one also we need it to other us at that time. So on this note, I just want to ask the European Union, as you are investing a lot of resources on the humanitarian aspect and also the peace and security to the group, I'm also asking that providing funding for the youth peace building activity will really bring a tangible result, as you can see from all of us. It started young and now we are growing old. Because we started there, we need something again. And also participation of the NAPS, which is the National Action Plan on Peace and Security. That will actually allow these young people to be engaged by political by partners. And the most important part that I want to emphasize two. One is to enhance the capacity building of these young people. Without building their capacity, I don't see a tangible result that will come out from the EA. But if you're bringing young people to the table, you don't build them, don't give them skill and knowledge, it's very hard to know. Another one also, which is lacking behind on our various countries, is the institutionalizing youth participation in this public institution. We get it so high because so many public institutions are not including this element of youth participation in peace and government. So they are more focusing more on the political actor. When they see a young person who is active in peace building and conflict transformation, they will just go and also trying to bring that person. With now the political manipulation. So to me, I would like to just to stop from there with a key message that I also want to emphasize in my first speech, that international community or international actors must end facet diplomacy on the issue that are affecting humanity.
And we already have our first question comment.
Good, and I think Lydia is not here, right? So nobody will speak on Kenya for the moment. Okay, great.
So we have Emma. Emma, thank you for being so active.
Like
we appreciate it. We really like Emma. We hope to see you in person tomorrow or at our thematic next or at the table the next day. So intergenerational dialogue is important, but youth are also seen as a threat to replace the older generation. Yet this is not a competition nor is a favor. It is a peace, security, and development issue.
It was a comment, not a question.
It was a comment, yeah, but we like the comments as well. And also reopening the floor for people that are following us from office, I would say, rather than home, but wherever you are. Yep, go.
Yes, I like the fact that you actually point out the intergenerational gap. And recently, we had interlocal government and youth advocacy dialogue in Greater Nile in South Sudan, where we bring 5 ministries who are responsible for the youth affairs. And the intergenerational gap actually came up the question of, if we give you a platform, for example, we empower you, give you resources, you will just come and take over our seat here, where we've been, because most of them, they call themselves liberators, you know that. So to me, I think that it is not the case of replacing them. It is the case of creating a conducive environment, a conducive platform where people should listen to each other. The grievances that these young people are going through. And to my surprise, that majority of them, even they don't want to sit in a room like this with young people who are knowledgeable about the issues that are affecting them. And I also pointed out that the tokenism aspect, where these government officials trying to do, they want to bring someone who is very naive for them to be manipulative. When the others also are asking, why are you bringing someone who is not representing our affairs in? And now you'll find it out that they call themselves, they call these young people who don't question them. These are good boys. You see that? So I think that while also political actors, from even the face actors, even the others are trying, to change the trend, where they want this generation to be a soft generation, where they don't want these people actually to tell the truth. You see that? So we also need to think around, why are we acting like that? You see that? So to me, I think intergenerational dialogue and intergenerational co-leadership is needed when it comes to the gaps that we are talking about. We need to create a platform where these young people actually should come in with the government official to discuss these issues. I asked, and I told them, there's a need for all these public institutions to create a youth desk that will act as a youth advisory board or advisory council to them, where if they want to talk or they want to discuss the issues that are affecting them, these young people will just come out of other young people and tell them that we need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Seeing that. So that's the only way. So they should not run away from engaging. Continuous engagement with these young folks is very important. So I would like to just say that should be the way forward. Engage with them, continue engaging, keep telling them that young people are stakeholders as well. They are not competitors. So that's why now they will get to know that these young people are really important.
And maybe this is one of the things that the EU could bring, an experience that could bring. I mean, both Luke and myself and many of the leaders of today actually cut their teeth on a youth advisory board at the national level and the European level, the EU Forum, which actually has a broad, so maybe, gave an idea, we could try to connect the EU Forum and bring that experience there. Sorry, go ahead, Masoud.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity. So I wanted to compliment on one of the structural barriers that the young people are facing. For instance, very recently we have been in a conversation with child-focused organizations covering the region, and we mentioned the Gen Z issue. I hope some of my colleagues, especially from Kenya, would raise this further. And then we had participants from Rwanda, Tanzania, Ethiopia, South Sudan. So we were discussing, and then I raised this, that the young people didn't get the space. And I mentioned the Ethiopian experience in the 2018 reform. So like starting from 2013-14 in Ethiopia, we had a lot of young people protests, university protesters, like the Amara, the Oromo protesters. And then finally, the change of government happened. And all the promises made during those protest times by all who were manipulating the young people never happened after 2-3 years. And then we are now back in serious problems. And then these young people are recruited by These groups, these young people are now in the jungle. These young people are out of school. They are out of the system, and no system has put a safeguarding mechanism for their inclusion, for their meaningful participation in decision-making processes. And if you see the migration, the smuggling, human trafficking, all these challenges, the young people are dying because they don't see hope in the country, and they don't see whether they die on the border or in the country or somewhere on the Mediterranean Sea. And very unfortunately, the European governments also closed their doors. So where do these young people go? Should they be killed because of these ethnic conflicts that they don't contribute and they don't consent? Or should they die on the Mediterranean Sea? And then when they go illegally to Europe or maybe Middle East, then they end up their life in the prison. And that's why we seriously advocate that young people's voices should be considered. The young people have no issue with the older generation. Their issue is there is no system that gives them hope, that gives them guarantee that they are really part of the development they want to see. And after you go through like 18 years, 20 years of school, and then when you graduate, you have no job, then what you do? So I think the European Union should develop a strategy to engage governments in the region that they have a policy not on the paper, but that can be translated into action, especially in terms of job opportunity, in terms of supporting small microfinance and entrepreneurship opportunities, and most importantly, use meaningful participation in the political process, because nobody hears them, but they have brilliant ideas. And this age is changing. Look, now we have the AI. Yeah, I tell you, in Africa, we have a lot of brilliant young people, but we are not using them. Either we are manipulating them. I thank you very much.
Fidon and
the whole Africa Conference of Churches, we have started since like 6 years the campaign for African patriotism by the young people with the slogan, Africa, my home, my future. In 2022, we were able to gather 1,000 young people from all, not all, but mainly about 43 countries in Ghana. The idea being, when in 1945, when these students of Africa who were on scholarship from their colonizer, Britain, in Manchester, they met and decided, we don't want colonialism. We want independence. And we want fighting. That was a very bold moment. And I don't think they were looking for good opportunities or the colonial government to give them spaces. But a few years later, all Africa was independent. And many of them who were there were actually leading the independence movements, including the Jomo Kenyattas and Kwame Nkrumahs and Julius Nyerere's. And we think that same spirit is the one which the young people should take in Africa. There is no politician who opens up for competition, whether young or old, even among the young people themselves. They have to struggle and find the place and claim it. What we are seeing and what we had this year, we had the second All Africa Youth Congress in Nairobi. 500 young people. We limited it because we had 2,600 applicants, but 500 were able to gather in Nairobi for 4 days, discussing how do they want their Africa to be, and calling each other to meaningful political participation, where I don't think they are trying to claim or to demand and beg someone to allow them in the room, but they're actually taking the position. We have seen examples in Kenya, in Madagascar, and other places where actually they are never allowed by the government the government did everything they could do in order to silence them, but it doesn't work. Tanzania followed, and I'm from Tanzania myself, but I have seen how many people have been killed, many of them young people, in order for the government to silence them. Today, they have decided, they called for new demonstrations. And the government is absolutely scared. They have closed all roads in Dar es Salaam. So there is basically nobody on the street. That for me is a statement that these young people, you can no longer just ignore them. Even the threat that we are going to go, if you kill us, that's fine, has forced the government to cancel independence celebrations today. It's the Independence Day, 9th of December. But because of just fear of what these young people can boldly do, they have cancelled the holiday, the independence celebrations. There have been calls for people to stay at home, please don't go. For me, that is itself an effect that these young people, you can never again just silence them. And even if you kill them, they are not scared even of death. They say we are going to come. We saw the boldness, especially in Kenya, which seems to be the coach of all of the others. They are not even afraid of tear gas, canister. They just throw them back to the police, and they say, "Well, we are here to be killed, so go ahead and kill us. You are not going to finish all of us." So, I think what I would appeal to the international community, EU especially, is to find ways of supporting these movements. Because I know EU is an intergovernmental body. They relate with states. So they have limits of their own. However, that they are free to work with civil society, I think it's very important to identify these very strong movements, which I believe will be the ones which will change the continent. One of the speeches in Nairobi, someone was telling the people, the young people, hey, don't listen to Museveni when he is telling you that you are too young, because he started himself when he was 29. Think of Kagame, he was 27 when he became the party leader. Think of people like Julius Nyerere became a party leader at 32. So who is telling you you are too young when they themselves started at the age where you're at? So I think we need to encourage these movements, because the only credible transformation must come from within. And I have full of hope that these African young people, thanks to the AI and other things which are confusing everybody, but they make good use of them, that they can mobilize. In Tanzania, they started switch off the internet, didn't work. They go VPN, they go this and this. They organize, you don't know who is the leader. You don't know who you will kill. You kill today, but tomorrow there are people in the street. Then you think you have silenced the opposition. It doesn't work. I think this is the way they can actually be mobilized to work for peace. If they commit, we are not going to fight. We are not going to kill each other. We are going to work for peace, and we reject. Why don't we use the same kind of capacity and momentum to actually influence them to work for peace and reject violence, reject political oppression, reject tribalism, which is a big problem in Africa, reject this ethnic-centered politics, which are a very big trigger of conflict in many African, or even religious. Because what we see that these young people are beyond that. They are thinking beyond ethnicity. We saw that in Kenya, where tribalism is actually the main engineer of politics. But they're saying we are not part of that. We have grown here in the cities, we have everybody. So these beliefs we don't have. And I think we should try to encourage and find ways of supporting to encourage the same mentality to continue and also be leading Pan-Africanism. Because if we are dealing with the independent countries, yes, but I think the answer for Africa is to be maybe learning from EU to be really Africans, not these ethnically and nationally bound people in thinking. But if we are promoting Pan-Africanism and patriotism, and through these means which are available to us, we might be useful. They might be useful in fostering peace.
Yeah, thank you so much. Just to add that about the intergenerational conversations, like AAAC, that American Friends Service Committee, we have been doing it and actually working with the youth so that they are able to building their capacity for peace building and ensuring that we are gender inclusive. That is something we don't also want to leave the young girls behind. We work with them and we build their capacity. On the issue of Kenya, it is quite interesting. Yes, there were leaders. We had a dialogue and exchange program when during that time of the violence, and we had the young people in the meeting together with the young girls and young boys, and they were telling us, we don't, right now, we don't care. We are going to go there. Then we ask them, who is guiding you? No, we just use technology. We mobilize ourselves. If we want to go there and we want to say enough is enough. If we harness this technology for the youth to be able to build peace, we can reach so many, considering Africa is about 65% and the youth. So that kind of movement, if we enhance that technology to build peace and not violence, we would do quite a lot of justice to them. And of course, the young people, they realize that, in Kenya, they were saying no to bad governance. They were saying it has reached us a point that we don't want to hear corruption. We don't want to hear bad governance. And that's why we are going to the street. We want to see that getting, being the government to start working on it. We don't want to be told that, in future, you are the people of the future. Our future is now. And for me, that courage, that the way they were holding the flag and saying, we are non-violence, we are not violent. Actually, they had the flag saying that this is my country, this is Kenya. I don't want violence. And they went to the streets with their mobile phones, talking to one another. But the response from the government was tear gas, was guns. They were abducted. And the ones who were abducted, some of them up to today have never been found. Close to 60-something people. We don't know where they are. Is to ask the government, where are the young people? What happened to them? And they be brought, because they didn't mean any harm to anybody. They were just expressing the need for peace. Yet they were killed. Yet they were abducted. And even up to now, you ask the government, please, can we have a sitting? And of course, it's our president actually had a meeting with the youth on social media, X, and they were asking him hard questions. And he was unable to actually answer. And all they wanted is that, let's calm down, let's come together and talk. And for him, instead of engaging the young people, want to engage the old people and say that, how can I address these young people? We are doing the wrong things. So it's to urge, our governments, prevail upon them. Can you engage the youth? They have got their answers. We don't have answers for them. And for me, that is that's the direction we need to go, and not to forget both young boys and girls together. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We have several ones. We are already over time, so we are gonna close at 11:45. So keep in time. We have several, but please keep it short.
Yeah.
They were pre over there.
Mine is so brief. Thank you so much. I'm from Uganda, and around Uganda, there are so many refugees camps. And most of these refugees, when you go closer, they are dominated by so many youths moving across from DRC, from South Sudan, from Burundi and others. Now, my experience, why I wanted to speak is one. there is a drug abuse which is growing under them due to lack of education, the education standard. Sometimes you find in a place those refugee camps, there are so many. So putting up schools for these youths and containing them in meaningful plans become daily. So you start finding the youth engaged in drug abuse and other things. So many people come in to use them wrongly. So it is why it is important that the issue of the youth becomes so significant, especially where there is no education for them or programs or plans to contain them. When you listen to other speakers, you will see that their brains keep on boiling and working all the day, night and day. So it is good if we promote education and also meaningful agenda for them tomorrow. So if European Union came in, it would be so encouraging. Thank you.
Just maybe get a
Yeah.
few that haven't
Yeah.
spoken.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'll be very brief. Calls for inclusion of women and youth has centered on numeric representation rather than substantive. And so the response has been what my friend called tokenism. How many youths are in this? How many women are this? Not actually representing the issues that affect these groups of people. If you look at most of the budgets in this country, the European Union provides budgetary support to most of these countries in the Horn of Africa. But much of this money, you look at the budget of these countries, it goes more towards security. They call it security. And it is the purchase of arms to suppress the youth and the women. So I think support should be geared towards addressing the issues that affect youth and women. And when it comes to youth, the issue that affect them is unemployment, lack of education. And that is why it is easy for them to be recruited in terrorist organizations. And that's why they say if you don't harvest the youth dividend, you'll harvest the youth bomb. And so it is important that support should be geared towards things like vocational education, job creation. So even if European Union is providing budgetary support, the emphasis should be towards dealing with those issues. Because just including youth leads to tokenism. They say, okay, there are 5 youth. I come from a country where if you are 50 years old, you are called a youth.
That's the same in Italy, I would like
I can.
Yeah.
Especially if you're a woman.
Moses and I are youth where we come from. Because our president is 93 years old. Almost everybody is.
He's young.
Yeah. 2 years young, you know. So it's critically important that support should go towards dealing with the economic challenges that youth face. And they don't have access to education. And even if those who have access to education, they don't have access to education that creates the human resources for the kind of economy that exists in these countries.
Yeah.
So we talk about youth graduating from the university without jobs, graduated from the university with what? You know, their qualifications are not linked to the economy that exists. You know, recently I was very impressed when I saw that Ethiopia created Artificial Intelligence Institute. It tells you this is a country that's looking forward. But some of us come from countries where they're still using typewriters, where documents are still handwritten. And so the people who are governing these countries, we call them BBC because they were born before computers. You know, they don't really, they are, like I was looking at some statistics, the average age of heads of state in the Horn of Africa is 70 years. Average is 70 years. And then the median age of the population is 20 years. So there's a missing middle of about 50 years. So those who are governing don't understand the people they are governing, and those who are being governed don't understand the people who are governing them. And in some countries like Somalia, it's even 16 years. Ethiopia is 18 years. So if you look at most of these developed countries, they look at the demographics and invest in the things that the majority of the population requires. So sometimes when there are more old people, they invest more in health because most times they are sick. Now we have a lot of young people. The investment has to go towards education that creates the human resource for the kind of economy that exists in these countries. Thank you.
Do you want to give Malit the last word and then go to Luca to close us out?
Thank you. Actually, I would like to highlight on the inclusion of women as we are going on 16 days of activism on digital violence. And digital violence have been the major security risks for women participation in peace and security. Women who has been on social media has been facing the online abuses so that they don't want to go on social media and come up as taking initiatives on women's peace and security issues. So maybe if we can also work with social media companies like Twitter, X, and also Facebook, so that to regulate our messages so that can come up on women participation on peace and security. Also, that's a major issue. So just wanted to highlight that security.
Luca.
Thank you. Time to go to an end. It has been such a richful morning with so many elements. And as I am a very bad Italian, liking rhetoric, very often obliged in this EU institution to stick to 1 minute or 3 minutes intervention. When I was the president of this house, I had 5 minutes, so it was a lot. So now that they have no restriction, I can, no, I will stay short. So I will only concentrate on 4 things. On what you said, it was so rich and cannot be included in the synthesis, but the first is a big thank, and I'm very grateful that the new president, the next section, has decided to welcome you and to accept the proposal to include you, and also in his very busy agenda to be with us for 1 hour and a half this morning. The first is not rhetoric, but I am really fed up of all this discussing since now 40 years about women. In the 80s, because I'm quite old also, I am 63. So in the 80s, the women empowerment, women in development, the gender mainstreaming development was the big slogan, everything. So now, basta. It's time to pass from word to action. Women are at least the half of the sky, but very often they control, and in Africa, that's for sure, in Italy perhaps not so much, 80% of the real life and real economy. Being economy, being society, being caring, being family, being community, being education, being health. You know. So now basta. It's time to move, to pretend, to call, to strike. Imagine all the women make a strike at home. By many things, what the men can do. Even the elder grandfather, 95, leading the country. He can lead the country by the wives in the country where there are more than one decide to go on strike, he could have some problem. So let's take for serious this real force. And second, the youth. Africa is the youngest continent worldwide. 60% of the African population is under 24. You mentioned some figures. The youth under 18 in Africa are expected to go to 1 billion by 2040. So keep an alliance, and the youth are either women and their men. So make an alliance with the mom, the sister, the grandmother, and the youth. This will reshape the continent. But for doing this, there is, from one side, a clear goal of empowerment, and empowerment is not given by one, being your head of state, your chief of military staff, your churches, European Union, United Nations, is conquered. So take this. There is the brotherhood, and there should be the sisterhood, and the youth strong alliance. And coming to the other word, there's been at the core of also this morning when many things have been said. That means peace. Perhaps a revolutionary subject should be put on the table in Sudan, where today there is difficult to define what it is. It is something inconceivable. It is inconceivable that we have, and thanks, we have the flotilla and all the million of people in the street for Gaza. We have absolutely less on Ukraine. We have quite nothing on Sudan and on the many other conflicts, because the volume of what you described is enormous. And let's take a stand. The next table of whenever peace will be negotiated, half should be women, and half should be young. So 3/4 of the ones sitting on this table should be young and women. Perhaps things will change. Let's the man a little bit aside. I am still a man. I think I have not changed. I do not have in mind to change my sex in the last part of my life. But we have run and very often ruined the world. All the war are led by men, except very few one. Margaret Thatcher with the Malvinas and a few others. But yeah, but if you count, you can put on the one hand, no more. Who are leading? We are dividing. We're making alliance and after dividing, even in any country. So let's take an experiment. Let for 1 century women running and eventually ruined the world. Perhaps should be also a proposal to put on the table and also to put in Sudan. I was very recently, and I will go to the last 2 words I want to say, in Ukraine. It was not an official mission. It was a pilgrimage of hope in this year of reconciliation of 110 Italians going to Ukraine. We went from the 1st to the 5th of October, close to the border with Russia, in Kharkiv, that as all the country is again under a growing bombing. And one of you in producing before was repeating the same word we heard there, mostly by women leaders, trying to keep the country alive. And when the close friend that they say is sent to us the kind gift during the night, in the morning we start to repair. I remember I was very shocked to see Kharkiv. Kharkiv is 40 kilometers far from the border with Russia, 20 kilometers from the military front. It was occupied, and today is one of the elements put on the table of the negotiation. Kharkiv is a very lively city. I was shocked to see the cleanest street I have seen all around Europe, and the cleanest and more cared and cured park. As people say, they destroy, we clean the street, and we cure the park, because it's a sign to recompose our broken heart, to see something beautiful. But the main word was we want to be seen. Thanks for coming here with your bodies, not only with your word, because we want to be seen. And some of you are saying the same thing. There is a need for this huge situation of conflict, forgotten conflict, to be seen, to recognize that under the figures that are not only number, but are name, faces, history, pain, but also hopes and fights. And so most has to be done around this. And the last word, because I became also in this sense a little bit old, I start to travel to Africa in 1981. It was my first trip in Burundi and Rwanda. After I think I just was looking to at least to all the African countries except three. For they are big one. One is the most beautiful in the world is Namibia. I've never been in Namibia. Mozambique and Sudan. I've never been in Sudan, neither the north and the south. But no, I do not agree in the fact that someone of you was saying Europe should sit and establish priority and impose to the. No, Europe has to stop to do this. Definitely. Has to stop. We make a long fight to pass from a logic of development to a logic of partnership. Huh? And I even think that we have to go over the principle of partnership and to go to a principle of building alliances between government, institution, local institution, churches, civil society, women, youth, all together around the table. Yes, Europe can have money, can have some more power, just a little bit. But I continue to dream of a slogan that is not mine. It's called Your Africa. It was said for the first time by two Charlemagne Prize, that is the European prize. It was Andrea Riccardi and after Carlo Azeglio Ciampi, so two Italians that got this European prize, of a strong alliance between the two continents that will not face the cancel the history of Colombia, because it's there. It's part of our unfortunate. But in this history, there is also a lot of common roots that we have to develop in another manner. I had this discussion when I was the president of this house, and they make some mission to Africa, one in Ethiopia and the second one in Senegal, Ethiopia, because the president of Ethiopia was just awarded the Nobel Prize for Peace for the negotiation with Eritrea. There was a dream that Ethiopia could become the leader of changing the Horn of Africa, and Macky Sall was the president of the African Union, so a bridge between these two presidents could have. And I really do think that we need to build up a new strong alliance between these two parts of the world. Europe is depopulating, is becoming an aging and so very protective and conservative place, but it's still the second economic power of the world. It's still the largest market. It's still the largest place. It's still the place where everyone wants to come to live, not only because we're close. And Africa is the youngest and more dynamic, and so potentially more powerful. And you're becoming trapped in the past of the Chinese and the US, today of the Russian coming back again, but also the Emirates, the Turkish, and so many that are coming and raping the continent. But we have to build this alliance. This should be an alliance for daring a common, jointly shared, fair, sustainable future. So let's continue to work on this. In this house, you will always have open door and open mind to look for this. Of course, we are not so powerful means also in economic sense, but we are very, very on this side. And thank you so much for having been with us today. And I'm sure that your mission in Europe will be more than fruitful. Also, thanks to this lady. Sometimes it's a little too much, but she has done. We will survive.
Thank you everyone for people following from remote. I hope you will join us remotely on Thursday for the next activities. Lunch.